Nostradamus and the Planets of Apocalypse by Jason and Breshears, as read by Kevin Stevens, also known as Grendel Dark. Archive 6, Isometric Projections of 2046 AD. The past that is already dead remains present in the future that has yet to be born. Lewis Mumford, Technics and Civilization. The events of the year 2046 are not dissimilar from those of 2040. Both are globally destructive. Both result in at least 1 billion deaths, and both are caused by intruder planets known and feared by the ancients. Some of the historic disasters cited in the previous chapter and linked isometrically to 2040 reappear in isometric projections connected to 2046, howbeit they are themselves connected to other, as yet undisclosed, events. 2046 has many of its own calendrical surprises. Both Ursula Southhill and Nostradamus focused on the first cataclysm, dating it at 2040. Both mentioned the second catastrophe, but neither really concentrated on it, and both declared that the second was to be worse than the first. Naturally, one would think that they would have focused their attention on the second cataclysm, but this is not the case. There is an explanation for this. The world as we know and have built it will end in 2040. The comforts and innovations of this electricity-dependent civilization will end. No more artificial lighting supported by power grids, air conditioning, heating, microwaves, refrigerated foods. Whole cities, states, and nations will be reduced to rubble. Industry, manufacturing, and commerce will cease. The convenience of grocery stores and restaurants will be a memory. Starvation will induce people to do horrible things, and without operable hospitals, disease and plague will run rampant. There will be no inoculations, and infant mortality will be severe. With a major pole shift, the geography of the world will be altered, the seas too chaotic to traverse, and airports and aircraft virtually non-existent. Men will be catapulted into positions of social superiority as Bronze Age culture returns, our world plummeting into those cultural institutions prominent during the early and late Bronze Age, when planet Phoenix darkened the sun and caused global ruin in 2239 BC, 1687 BC, and 1135 BC. Women, having enjoyed unprecedented rights, privileges, and immunities from the days of suffrage until now, in social, corporate, and marital status, or independence, will find themselves willingly offering their bodies for protection, food, and shelter. Those resisting will be brutalized, owned, enslaved, and used for barter. Gangland dictatorships will carve their kingdoms out of the lands as murder for sport, pedophilia, and cannibalism become societal norms. Bands of survivors trying to rebuild communities will have to protect themselves from roving gangs and militant orders that seek to take what they have. Haunted people in mass migrations will wander the earth in no particular direction, searching for sustenance. After all this begins, there is really no reason for Mother Shipton or Nostradamus to elaborate further on the second and far worse disaster. It would be redundant. The second cataclysm cannot possibly do more damage than the first, which virtually ends 500 years of techno-industrial civilization. It is described by both of them as worse because it will result in a higher death toll. Phoenix, as the sixth seal of the apocalypse, will cause 1/4 of the world's population to perish, but Nibiru, referred to as wormwood in the Bible's Revelation, initiates the trumpet judgments that result in the death of 1/3 of mankind. This is not 1/3 of the people living on Earth in total, but 1/3 of those surviving after Phoenix kills 25% of humanity. Thus, about 50% of mankind will die between both of these horrific events. The second killing more than the first, but the first ending our way of life altogether. Let us now review the isometric projections involving 2046 AD. In 1918, throughout Europe and Asia, an epidemic killed 20 million people at the end of World War I, which in itself resulted in millions of casualties. This was 128 years after the 1790 discovery of the Aztec stone of the fifth sun. This apocalypse in stone not only pictographically refers to the Phoenix disaster in 2040, but also specifically refers to the 2046 AD cataclysm when Earth will be moved out of its place. The Aztec relic depicts the Day of Four movement as a pyramid with crossbars and an eye above it. This Day 4 movement marks the time in the future when a terrible disaster will occur. The crossed bars are a symbol from older Mesoamerican cultures that refer to the passage of an age, a period of time. Incredibly, this image on the Aztec artifact reflects what David Davison discovered in 1924 in the geometry of the Great Pyramid's base diagonals, crossed bars, that provided him with the date of 2045 for the termination of an astronomical chronology encoded within the Great Pyramid, as explained in Anunnaki Homeworld. Also in this book is shown conclusive proof that the Mayan long count calendar was never intended to end in 2012, but the 13 Bactune count timeline ends precisely in 2046 AD. The Aztec calendar stone is full of artistic imagery, and archaeologists have discovered that 5 of the animals depicted upon the gigantic relic are not from Mexico proper, but indigenous to the Mayan country. The Aztecs, so late in history, merely inherited what had been preserved by the Maya, who in turn inherited their sciences and prophecy from the older Olmeca. Counting 128 years after 1918 is 2046. Isometric projection interpretation. In 2046, the calendars will be changed because the position of the Earth orbiting around the Sun will be altered, thus changing the length of the year and length of the days. A new age will begin as an epidemic kills millions and North and Central America are destroyed. Maya origin was North America. Relic depicts cataclysmic events. This cataclysm will cause an amazing discovery at the Great Pyramid or within it. In 1913, people all over North America stared awestruck into the sky as a train of meteors passed 30 miles above in February. This is almost 8,000 times closer than our own moon. These objects were witnessed by people in Canada, the United States, and in the Atlantic as far south as Bermuda. It began as a luminous body with a tail that grew larger and larger until it was close to the Earth and seemed to be a whole train of fragments, and they moved with a peculiar, majestic, dignified deliberation. It appeared in the distance, and another group emerged from its place of origin. This was 131.5 years after 1783, when through the Revolutionary War, the United States officially won its independence from Great Britain, marking the beginning of the American Empire. Also, in 1783, a quake in Calabria, Italy, killed 30,000 people. Counting 131.5 years after 1913 is 2046. Isometric projection interpretation. In 2046, the entire northern hemisphere will behold an amazing astronomical sighting. This will signal the total end of the United States. Quakes in the northern Mediterranean and Italy will result in high death tolls. In 1911, flooding kills 100,000 people in China, and in the same year, the Republic of China is formed. This year is the exact midpoint between the 1776 AD American independence and the 2046 AD end of the United States, being 135 years before the Republic of China began. Counting the same 135 years after 1911 is 2046. Isometric projection interpretation. In 2046, one superpower finally dies out, USA, as another is born in the Far East amidst flooding and mass fatality. In 2046, the kings of the East will become the superpower, this having been foreseen in biblical prophecies and those of Nostradamus. In 1908, A comet or meteorite exploded in the sky over Tunguska, Siberia, as seen in the previous chapter. It destroyed forests for hundreds of miles and knocked people off their feet 100 miles away. This was 138 years, Phoenix orbital period, after 1770, when comet Lexell appeared and then passed within 1.39 million miles from the Earth. Counting 138 years after 1908 is 2046. Isometric projection interpretation. In 2046, a celestial body will come dangerously close to the Earth, and debris from this proximity will enter our atmosphere and detonate/contaminate. In 1905, at Kangra, India, an earthquake killed 20,000 people. This was 141 years after 1764 AD, when astronomer Hoffman observed through a telescope a gigantic celestial object, Phoenix, passing over 1/5 of the surface of the Sun. A sighting also experienced by hundreds of thousands of people in Europe with the naked eye. Counting 141 years after 1905 is 2046. Isometric projection interpretation. In 2046, a huge celestial body will be observed as it approaches Earth. Quakes will afflict India, resulting in a tragic loss of life. In 1893, a total eclipse of the Sun on November 30th over Santiago, Chile, allowed tens of thousands of people a few minutes to gaze up into the darkened sky in amazement to behold a mysterious, reddish, and nebulous matter enveloping the Earth. After the crimson wisps of clouds in space passed, while the Sun was still obscured, a dark object was seen by the people as it passed over the Moon. Just prior to this in October, Comet Brooks was photographed at the instant it was colliding into some unknown dark object in space. The picture published in the 1894 edition of Knowledge. This was 153 years after 1740, when astronomer James Short discovered a planet-sized object passing through the inner solar system near Venus. Isometric projection interpretation. In 2046, a large planetary body will enter the inner solar system, bathing the Earth in cosmic dust, possibly darkening the Sun. In 1883, astronomers reported seeing black objects passing between the Earth and Sun, irregularly shaped bodies. An earthquake occurred on the Isle of Ischia off Naples, and the sea became tumultuous. Earthquakes also happened in Turkey and southern Russia. The ancient volcano on Krakatoa in Indonesia, Mount Anak, exploded with a force equal to 220 megaton bombs, an explosion so powerful it excavated a hole at the bottom of the Pacific, 19,000 feet deep, and ejected boulders as far as 25 miles into the atmosphere. The blast sent a tidal wave 100 feet tall, ruining areas of Java and Sumatra, destroying 300 towns and killing 36,000 people. Volcanic ash left a dust veil around the entire world for years, darkening the Earth and making winters more severe than usual. The explosion was the loudest ever heard by man, heard even 3,000 miles away, and the quaking was felt around the planet. Scientists have published that it was this dust veil that cooled the Earth and filled the atmosphere with strange sights, and while some of this was true, they concealed from the public that even before the volcanic detonation, as early as February, 6 months earlier, there were many reports of cosmic dust blanketing the Earth. In November was seen a strange comet-like object with two tails. This is all 163 years after 1720, when Comet Nexell was seen very brightly and volcanic activity and earthquakes occurred in the Azores. Counting 163 years after 1883 is 2046. Isometric projection interpretation. A comet-like object will appear in the skies in 2046, attended by volcanic activity and earthquakes in the South Pacific, Mid-Atlantic, from Asia Minor, Turkey, to Central Asia, and in Russia. Volcanic ash and cosmic dust will fill the atmosphere, and the northern Mediterranean Sea will become chaotic as quakes afflict Italy. In 1859, John Taylor's book, The Great Pyramid, Why It Was Built and Who Built It, was published, becoming an instant sensation in England. It was the first serious attempt to show that the monuments in Egypt were of pre-flood origin, constructed by patriarchs mentioned in the Bible. In this same year, massive coronal ejections from the sun's surface caused intense electromagnetic storms that reached Earth and burned out telegraph wires throughout North America and Europe. Dr. Les Carbeau saw black objects passing over the surface of the sun. This was 187 years after 1672, when European astronomers reported the appearance of a comet. Counting 187 years after 1859 is 2046. Isometric projection interpretation. A comet-like body will be seen from the northern hemisphere that will pass between Earth and the Sun and cause electromagnetic disruptions of telecommunications technologies. This global event was originally recorded in the Great Pyramid's geometry, an astronomical chronology ending in 2046. Recall that the prophet Edgar Cayce referred to the Great Pyramid's importance when the Earth will be moved out of its place. Further, as shown in Anunnaki Homeworld, the geometrical measurements of the Great Pyramid are a scale model of the northern hemisphere. It is from the north of the equator that the Great Pyramid is located at 30 degrees. The northern hemisphere is also the location of what is largely known as the Western powers, the European, British, and Canadian, and United States. Those being the nations inferred by the statement earlier made, the whole Western world will die. In 1845, Comet Bella fragmented into two pieces. This was 200.5 years after 1645, when astronomers noticed a strange moon-like object near Venus. And the Ming Dynasty of China falls to the Manchus just after a series of natural disasters, famine, and revolts. Counting 200.5 years after 1845 is 2046. Isometric projection interpretation. In 2046, a large celestial object enters the inner system and begins to be fragmented, as terrible calamities are already occurring in the Far East. In this year, a new Chinese government emerges. Recall that this was also found to be true in the isometric projection involving the year 1911. This begins the prophetic career of the kings of the East. They will begin to invade the West. In 1816, Mount Tambora erupted with earthquakes, the detonation heard over 1,000 miles away. An estimated 80,000 people died throughout Java and Indonesia. Also in 1816, a huge spectacle was seen passing through the sky that apparently missed the Earth. This was 230 years after 1586, when a volcano killed 10,000 people in Java and Indonesia. Counting 230 years after 1816 is 2046. Isometric projection interpretation. As something appears to approach the Earth in space in 2046, volcanic and seismic activity in Java and Indonesia will kill tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people. In 1811, the Great Comet passed through the sky in December, and immediately, the greatest earthquake in U.S. history occurred as reviewed in the prior chapter. Thunder boomed from clear skies, the sky darkened, and the entire eastern seaboard from New York to Florida rocked. This was 234.5 years after 1577, when astronomers from Altorf, Germany, viewed black objects through their telescopes in the sky in December, and a comet appeared earlier in October. Counting 234.5 years after 1811 is 2046. Isometric projection interpretation. As objects appear in the sky in 2046, the sky will darken over the northeastern United States, and the entire Atlantic coast states will suffer a series of catastrophic earthquakes. In 1801, G. Piazzi of Palermo, Sicily, discovered the asteroid Ceres on January 1st. Astronomers searching for another planet in the empty region between the orbits of Mars and Jupiter, as predicted under the Titius-Bode law, instead discovered the asteroid belt. In this same year, French engineer and archaeologist Edmé Francois Jomard and astronomer N.A. Noué counted 203 as the levels of masonry that form the Great Pyramid. This was the first recorded accurate count of the levels of the monument. Once a capstone or chief cornerstone is laid atop the structure, it will be complete at 204 levels. This was 245 years after 1556, when in January an earthquake killed 830,000 people in the Shanxi province of China, principally at Shanxi. Later, in April, a comet appeared. Counting 245 years after 1801 is 2046. Isometric projection interpretation. In 2046, astronomers will discover a new celestial member of the solar system and possibly its relation to the Great Pyramid. China will be devastated by seismic activity with a shocking death toll. In 1759, astronomers reported observing a planet-sized object moving through the inner solar system. Also, Halley's Comet made an appearance, and in this year, the first scientific exploration of the Great Pyramid was conducted by Frederick Norton Lewis. This was 287 years after 1472, when a particularly bright comet appeared, and it was studied by Johannes Muller, who even made positional calculations for future astronomers. This is also the year Leonardo da Vinci was born. Counting 287 years after 1759 is 2046. Isometric projection interpretation. In 2046, a planet-sized body will enter the inner solar system, and perhaps its relevance to the Great Pyramid will be recognized. In 1680, a comet appeared in December and was studied by a student of the famous Hevelius named George Dorfel, as well as by John Flamsteed and Edmund Halley. In this year of 1680, the Anunnaki planet Nibiru was at aphelion, being the furthest distance away from the Sun, way out in the Kuiper Belt surrounding our solar system. This is 366 years after 1314 AD, when Nibiru darkened the sun over Asia, causing quakes, floods, volcanic disasters, and plagues. But over Europe, which viewed its passing at night, they beheld a black shadow darken the stars and a comet. This year is detailed fully in Anunnaki Homeworld, counting 366 years after 1680 is 2046. Isometric projection interpretation. In 2046, planet Nibiru will pass closely to Earth and destroy the Far East, much in the same way as planet Phoenix in 2040 destroys the West. In 1582, a comet appeared and was blamed for a terrible plague that afflicted Thuringia and the Netherlands. Pope Gregory XIII altered the Julian calendar, initiating a new calendar called the Gregorian, which eliminated 10 days by making October 5th to be October 15th. This was 464 years after 1118 AD, when a light appeared in the sky more brilliant than the sun, followed by a great cold spell, famine, and plague in Europe. Counting 464 years after 1582 is 2046. Isometric projection interpretation. In 2046, a strange light will be seen in the sky, and it will cause ruin and death in Europe. Its appearance altering the calendar, causing Earth to move, change its orbital position. In 1556, the writings of Nostradamus were all over Europe. In January, a quake killed 830,000 Chinese, as already mentioned, and this was followed 2 months later by a comet. This was 490 years after 1066, when a comet-like object was seen just prior to the Norman invasion of England. Geoffrey Gaymar's L'Histoire des Anglais reports that the English people witnessed a fire in the sky that burned brilliantly, which came near the earth, appeared to move erratically, then descended into the sea. In many places, the forests caught fire. William of Normandy conquered the last Saxon king, Harold. Counting 490 years after 1556 is 2046. Isometric projection interpretation. Recall that Nostradamus enigmatically referred to the proof of the Normans. This concerns a sign, Mass death will occur in China, and the cataclysm will end the English dynasty when the sign, Nibiru, appears in the sky. In 1301, a comet appeared and was spectacular to behold. This was a period referred to as the Seven Comets over Europe, from 1298 through 1314. This was 740 years after 566 AD, when brilliant lights in the sky appeared around the sun and the heavens looked to be on fire, as recorded by Gregory of Tours. Counting 740 years after 1301 is 2046. Isometric projection interpretation. In 2046, people will look into the skies, day and night, and see fantastic and awe-inspiring phenomena. In 1293, an earthquake killed 20,000 people at Kamakura, Japan. This was 753 years after 540 AD, when a total eclipse of the sun occurred according to the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle. As sophisticated computers reveal that no eclipses occurred at the time, which are caused by the moon, this sun-darkening episode had to have been caused by some unknown body transiting between Earth and the sun, casting at least parts of the British Isles in shadow. Also in this year, the bubonic plague began in Justinian's domains in the Eastern Roman Empire, spreading to Europe. Counting 753 years after 1293 is 2046. Isometric projection interpretation. In 2046, seismic activity will afflict Japan and the Far East with a terrible toll on life, while over Europe the sun will be obscured. A global epidemic will reach the Western world. In 1202, at the height of the famine in Egypt, a series of quakes began that were felt as far away as Syria. The destruction was widespread and reviewed in the previous chapter. This was 844 years after 358 AD, when disastrous earthquakes shook the areas of Macedonia, Asia, Pontus, and the metropolis of Bithynia, which received the worst. At dawn, on August 24th, the sky quickly gave way to thick masses of dark clouds that descended to the ground, blotting out the sun, and casting the land into thick blackness. Ammianus Marcellinus reported that the destruction began from the sky in the form of loud crashes, winds, and fatal lightning blasts. Just as fast as it all appeared, the sky cleared again, the clouds vanished, the earthquake stopped, and the beautiful day reappeared, but was contrasted by the sickening visage of thousands of mangled and torn human bodies among the pile of debris and transfixed on splintered timbers. In the same year of 358, the Jewish rabbi Hillel III altered the natural Jewish calendar and replaced it with a new fixed calendar. Counting 844 years after 1202 is 2046. Isometric projection interpretation. In 2046, amidst violent atmospheric storms and darkening of the skies, earthquakes will destroy cities and their inhabitants throughout the Black Sea to these nations bordering the Mediterranean Sea. Due to this disaster and others of the time, a new calendar will be adopted. In 1117 AD, a comet filled the sky, traveling towards the Orient from the north, and the moon turned blood red during an eclipse. This was 929 years after 188 AD, when the Chinese, the Orient, recorded the appearance of a bright comet. Counting 929 years after 1117 AD is 2046. Isometric projection interpretation. In 2046, a celestial body traveling from the north will be clearly seen from the Far East, and the moon will appear as the color of blood. In 66 AD, a comet appeared and was seen by those inhabiting the Roman Empire and Judea. A plague devastated the city of Rome and outlying areas, the city filled with corpses. The Jewish war began against the Romans occupying Palestine. The death toll of this war was catastrophic. This was 1,980 years after 1915 BC, when planet Nibiru appeared as a sky dragon over Mesopotamia, causing earthquakes, plague fogs, lightning blasts, and flooding, an event expounded upon in Anunnaki Homeworld. Incidentally, Nibiru's total orbit is 792 years and 66 Anno Domini isometric epicentral year, was 792 months into the Anno Domini calendar. 66 years times 12 months is 792. Counting 1,980 years after 66 AD is 2046. Isometric projection interpretation. In 2046, Nibiru will fill the sky and cause a worldwide series of disasters unlike anything that has been experienced by humankind in thousands of years. There are literally hundreds of thousands of scientific theories. There are many millions of people who believe them. John Gordon made an astute observation when he declared that orthodox science works only because approximations are allowed. Hypotheses grow into neatly packaged theories that are passed off as facts because scientists leave for themselves plenty of room for error. Knowledge becomes indefinite because approximations allow for the manipulation of data in myriads of ways. The scientist is rarely proven wrong in his assertions because he often asserts nothing absolute at all. When juggling amorphous variables, the scientist assumes a body of knowledge that in essence maintains no exact definite dimensions. But what you have been presented within 3 short books is a fixed timeline of events, a matrix of interwoven histories that all resurface through space and time in 2040 and 2046. This is possible because they are orbital and thus astronomical chronologies. There are no approximations provided. This book does not set out to prove the existence of the orbital periods of planets, Phoenix, and Nibiru. This was already provided in When the Sun Darkens, Phoenix, and Anunnaki Homeworld, Nibiru. The book you are holding now is a supplement, merely adding to the knowledge already set in stone and published in the prior books. Because of the absence of approximates, knowledge is not taken away or lost. It can only be added to. Unfortunately, it is for these reasons that scientists today will be the greatest enemies to this work. As the attorney employs Latin and obscures terminology when addressing the bench to conceal his art from the layman, as the mystic employs strange symbols and ambiguity to control the outcome of her doings, as the old prophets spoke in the language of universals to mask the particulars they sought to address, so too do the modern scientists base their predictions on approximations. It is safe for them. One cannot be pushed off a foundation that he is not standing on. Calendrical isometrics is a science, and it can reveal many things to the sincere student. A unique discovery can be shown to be authentic. A hoax can be exposed, no matter how many believe it. A people of unknown pedigree today can be linked back to their ancestors. Wars can be predicted, and with whom, and, as we have seen, disasters can be foreseen to the exact year. By recognizing this, we more clearly understand the Russian physicist Ouspensky. What is necessary first to understand is not that the future is formed by any separate acts of the present, but that the whole of the future is an unbroken continuity with the present, as the present is with the past. As we found, Mother Shipton's life was intrinsically connected with the object of her message. She was born in the same year that planet Phoenix silently passed through the inner system in 1488. So too do we find an interesting parallel concerning the year Nostradamus was born. In 1503, a windstorm dislodged a huge chunk of rock from a high mountain overlooking the sea at Naples, Italy. Inside the rock, a gathering of people discovered the huge fossil of a wooden ship with a design unlike any of them were familiar with. An Italian historian and statesman named Giovanni Pontano was one of these witnesses who studied the amazing find. This was the year Nostradamus was born. When Nostradamus was 37 years old in 1540, Spanish miners searching for silver and gold traces near Caloa, Peru, removed earth in a deep mine shaft and were astounded to find an entombed wooden vessel of extreme antiquity of an unconventional design. Shortly afterward, back on the other side of the Atlantic, in Bern, Switzerland, miners digging for metals in the nearby mountains at a depth of 100 feet came upon the remains of an underground ship carved with well-fashioned ornamentation. Its masts were broken and an iron anchor was found. But to the horror of the miners, they also discovered among the timbers the skeletons of 40 men. In order to comprehend the relevance of these archaeological discoveries, one would have to know the history of planet Phoenix. Phoenix was named by Nostradamus and dated to return in 2040, which would be his message as recorded in the centuries, which were composed during his life. These discoveries, made during his life, starting with the year of his birth, are relative because these land masses that covered these three entombed ships were formed in 2239 BC during the 1-year-long global cataclysm known as the Great Flood. In this year, planet Phoenix darkened the sun after remaining visible for 7 days and initiated the deluge. These three ships were buried ever since that tragic catastrophe. They were unearthed during the life of the prophet who, over 37 centuries later, would record Phoenix's return.